Now, let's move on to other news. Europe fears that large quantities of Afghan heroin may flood into the EU via Russia if the current visa regime is lifted. That's according to the head of the State Drug Control Service.
Yeah, he claims that Russia might tighten control at its borders if visa-free travel to Europe is ever to be a reality. Prime Time's Marina Zarubin, well, she's got more on this.
Wouldn't it be great if you could just get on a plane and come to Russia without going through long bureaucratic procedures of getting a visa, without getting the tests and the registration? Russia and the EU have long been talking about introducing a visa-free regime, but there are many obstacles in the way, and the main problem for the EU is security.
There are certain things that you cannot, of course, forget. This is related, of course, to organized crime, to terrorism, to illegal immigration.
Drugs in particular as organized crime is a big concern. Drugs manufactured in Afghanistan, which are 93% of all heroin manufactured in the world, easily get through Tajikistan to Russia. And the southern border, the Russia's border with Tajikistan, is not secured.
Any citizen of Tajikistan can load up a truck full of cabbage with heroin hidden inside, simply fill out a piece of paper saying he's taking his produce to Russia, and no one will stop him at the border to check what's inside.
Currently in the administration there are two positions. On the one side there is a camp arguing that borders should be even looser. It's the side that is arguing for a creation of a common trade zone of former Soviet bloc. On the other hand, there are people arguing that it is organized crime that is a very big problem, and drug trafficking a very big problem for Russia as well.
Both positions have their advantages. Our trade relations are close and we should strive to expand them. But the border needs to be secure. Currently there is a clash in the administration between these two arguments.
So for any visa facilitation or any visa-free regime, there needs to be guarantees on both sides that security will be there.
For the time being, we are not so much on the idea of setting time frames, but rather on setting issues that have to be solved.
So it seems that it is a very slow process, and the times when expats won't have to go through very long bureaucratic procedures, unfortunately, don't seem to be in sight.
And to talk more about the pros and cons of getting rid of visas, we're joined now in the studio by Chris Gilbert from the Russo-British Chamber of Commerce. Thanks very much for joining us. So let's start with the benefits. What would be the good things about changing the system?
Well, I mean, obviously, as long as there's the more freedom of movement there is between countries, the more possibilities that there is for business people to travel, the more business people are in one country, obviously the more opportunities are for them to do business together.
If we even talk about Britons, I mean, how difficult is it to obtain a visa to get into Russia, for example?
It's not difficult. I mean, it's not cheap. It depends what kind of visa you want to get. If you want to get a sort of 12-month multi-entry visa to come to Russia, it can cost in the region of about £500–600. And it takes about a month to do, because it takes a long time to get the invitation, which the original visa is based on.
Because as a Russian, I can say that obtaining a British visa is cheaper than that.
It's cheaper, but it's also not. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
No, you have to give your fingerprints. It's a whole procedure.
Yeah, the reason for the system becoming more strict in the last couple of years is a worldwide problem that the UK is trying to address with, the problem with the war on terrorism, etc., etc., etc. The problem is that your average Russian will not see themselves as a terrorist suspect, so they're wondering why they're being treated in the same way. But the problem is, I mean, the decision was taken to introduce this kind of one-size-fits-all visa regime.
Europe stated that the EU would not be happy with an open visa regime with Russia because of drug trafficking through Afghanistan. Do you think Russia can do something in order to battle that situation?
Well, I mean, Russia is in a unique position because I think it does have, obviously, the longest border in the world. I mean, it is bordered on both sides of its territory, which is vast, by radically different countries. The problem is the southeastern fringe of Russia is, many times larger than Europe itself. But if that could happen, then there would be more a case, I think, from the European side to at least alleviate or simplify the system.
What are the fears in the modern day of letting Russian people just go where they want?
I think there should be no fears. I mean, everything should be taken on a case-by-case basis. If someone has, you know, if there is some kind of suspicion about an application, then obviously that person shouldn't get a visa if it's, you know, if it's beyond a reasonable doubt that they might either apply for political asylum or just go to ground when they're in the UK. But when you're talking about, I don't know, a senior director of a major international bank who happens to be a Russian citizen coming to London to have business meetings, then I think that should be
Is there still a major problem with people wanting to stay when they leave the country, or is that based on an old stereotype?
Oh, it's based on an old stereotype. I think I think it's a very old stereotype now. I mean, most Russians, if they want to go and live and work somewhere else, then they will go and live and work somewhere else.
Legally.
Illegally, exactly.
So when you weigh in the scales, you've got the drug problem, possibly any other political implications, and then a vast tourism opportunity with Russia,
yes.
Russians easily accessing other countries. So do you think that tourism loses at the moment?
Tourism loses hand over fist, and not just from Russians going to Europe, but from Europeans coming to Russia. You know, I mean, you have the Baltic states are part of the EU, so there's visa-free travel there. You know, you've got beautiful cities like Moscow or St. Petersburg, which would be, you know, perfect, maybe not a weekend destination because it's still a 3.5-hour flight from London, but, you know, for a short break. But if you add on to that, you know, the expense and the whole travel side, you've got to spend maybe £150, £200 just to get a tourist visa.
Right, well, thank you very much for talking to us. Chris Gilbert from the Russo-British Chamber of Commerce.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
Thank you.